All right. I am here with Adam Lippin, the founder and CEO of Hear Me. How's it going, Adam?
It's going well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to unpack multiple exits here on this episode. But before we get to your multiple successes, let's talk about your origin story. What's your background and how did you get into business and entrepreneurship?
So my origin story is I grew up in Ossining, New York, as a fairly lonely child. I knew I was gay when I was young, and so it created a sense for me of like needing to isolate and not trust people, and sort of feeling like I needed to create my own identity and create my own space in the world because I didn't think I'd be able to function in a typical organization. And so it had its negative psychological effects, but it really drove a lot of my business growth and sort of personal growth as well.
Got it. Got it. So let's talk about the first real kind of success that you saw with business. Did you find co-founders? Did you raise money? What did that story look like?
So my first company was a restaurant chain. It was a rest. I started renting a kitchen and a bar on the Upper East Side of New York City, pretty much about 2 years out of college. It was called Atomic Wings, and it's funny. I was just I have an alert when my name comes up in Google, and they're opening up like all these stores now all over like in Kansas and Iowa, and so I always get these alerts because I'm on the storyline. But anyway, so I started. I loved buffalo chicken wings, and you couldn't get great buffalo chicken wings in New York. I went to school upstate. I was a wing fanatic, and I moved to New York. It's like I can't believe can't get good chicken wings. So I brought authentic buffalo wings to New York, and I started, like I said, in the kitchen and bar. And 25 years later, we had about 33 locations and a really significant wholesale business. So I created my own, 9 different sauces, and we wholesaled them with national wholesale distributors. And so that was my first company that I exited from, and I exited it because I was opening a store in Massachusetts somewhere, and the job of a franchisor is to be like a cheerleader, and I could care less. Right at that point, I was like, the world does not need another chicken wing store, and my heart left, and I was like, okay, now is the time for me to get out. And I found these wonderful Dunkin Donut franchisees that were really motivated about the idea, and they're doing a great job.
Very cool. Very cool. So you were doing like wholesale with sauces and then also the brick and mortar stores?
Yeah, so I had restaurant locations, and then like US Foods, Cisco, and the large restaurant distributor would sell them in 4 1-gallon containers.
Nice. So what were you tracking at a restaurant? I know a lot of guys and people that operate businesses that are like, bagel shops and all different types of retail organizations. And, margins can kind of be thin and the operations are kind of crazy. But what types of things were you tracking specifically at Atomic Wings?
Well, obviously, food cost, labor cost, and revenue, right? So how do restaurants are probably the toughest business out there, and so really you need to really control your food cost, and you need to really you know your labor costs. I mean, those are the two highest drivers of cost. So those were numbers I was always looking at and tweaking and battling with the vendors and the distributors and tweaking, and it's sort of an ongoing sort of battle when you have a restaurant chain.
Hmm. So I would guess that there's probably a few hundred restaurateurs listening to this right now. And a question that pops up is how did the conversations begin with the Dunkin' Donut acquiring kind of franchisors? Like, what was
So
that
we
like? Were
were
they customers? How
franchising
did they?
locations, and
Okay.
then they were interested in the franchise. And as I spoke to them and learned more about their background as Dunkin' Donut franchisees, um, and they had some financial backing, I thought these would be really good people to sell the company to, that they could do a really good job expanding it. And that's when I started having a conversation with them. So I never went to like a business broker, sort of officially put it on the market per se. I started talking to them, and it just sort of worked out.
Nice. And when it comes to, it's kind of foreign to me with multiples and valuations on like a franchise. A friend of mine has a franchise currently that I talk to every once in a while about like what the numbers are and stuff. But how do you extrapolate out a valuation on something like multiple brick and mortar stores and like the sauces and everything like that? Because those are two very kind of separate revenue
Yeah.
channels.
So the wholesale business was it's fairly straightforward because you know your margin because the prices they pay change every year and you know your so that's fairly easy, right? And it's just a percentage of the sales and what is the goodwill associated with it and what's the ability to keep on expanding with it. In terms of a restaurant, as a franchisor, it's a little bit different than an individual owner of a restaurant because it's really about the franchisors make money by franchisees' fees, right? So what is coming in from the franchisees, and then how can you expect this company to grow? And for franchisors, it's an interesting business because you need to make sure your franchisees are doing well enough that they can pay you and feel good about paying you. So
Hmm.
there's basically multiples of those numbers.
Yeah, got it. So let's transition to the next success. So
Yeah.
how long was it after you stepped away, you sold to these, franchise entrepreneurs?
It was
How
about
long
a
was it?
minute, right? It was about a minute. So I had just turned 50 and I knew that I had more in me and I like working. I like creating. I liked bringing things to fruition and I really wanted to do something in my mind more meaningful. And I was really, because of my background, really interested in loneliness and a sense of disconnection. And there was a quote from the Surgeon General stating that loneliness is worse than smoking 15 cigarettes a day and worse than obesity, right? And it was true with my own life. My loneliness spurred a lot of drug addiction and all sorts of negative ways of being and acting and thinking, which wasn't helpful. So I wanted to attack loneliness at scale. So I started a professional cuddling company called Cuddlist, Cuddlast. It's still around and it's going really well, even though I sold out. And the concept was that if like touch, there's a concept called skin hunger and skin and touch deprivation that we think of touch generally like as a sexual term, but really when you think about touch, when you hold a baby, when someone's feeling sad, when you're celebrating something, you're holding your grandma's hand, and people need touch. That need doesn't change, but your access to it changes. And a lot of people don't have access to it. So think about people who are, disabled or maybe severely overweight, or their husband or wife died after 30 years. And so I wanted to create a business where people could get healthy platonic touch, feel more human and alive. But what was really exciting for me, like the franchise business, was creating all these entrepreneurs. Is we had a training program where we trained people to become cuddle therapists, where they would pay us a fee and pay for training, and they would be their own bosses basically. So it was like almost like a little mini franchisee. We would give them the tools and the marketing opportunities, and then they would run their own businesses, and we would sort of support them as well. So that was sort of the idea behind it, and it worked. And we've trained thousands and thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of clients, and it's been really gratifying.
Very cool. Interesting. So the metrics that you were tracking, once again, we shifted from the atomic wings to Cuddlist. So were they similar metrics? What could you kind of share around the
Yeah,
metrics and the
so we
KPIs?
our income came in from two primary sources: training. So when someone became a cuddlist, they had the training was $179, and then there were all these different advanced trainings. So that was a revenue source for us, and the other revenue source was the monthly fee that they paid us to be listed on our site. So those were the two main numbers tracking. And then what you're really looking at is sort of like, acquisition of new people signing up for training and new people coming onto the website versus attrition, right? Versus like how long will someone stay on the site for, and how do you keep them engaged on the site so they will want to keep on being on the site and keep on paying you. And so it was all about creating a community. One of the things I really learned with Cuddlist is that when people feel part of something larger than themselves, they become evangelists about it. And so the community of people that wanted to be there to support other people and was really large, and it was sort of attracted other people that were also sort of holistic healers, and maybe they were massage therapists or doulas or energy workers, and they loved this concept. And in terms of the business aspect, you track sales for trainings and length of time people are on the site, and some ancillary We sold some T-shirts and stuff like that. But basically, those were the two main revenue drivers.
Got it. Got it. So let's move into the exit, the fun part here. What was the size of the team when the conversations began, and what was that like with the
So
conversations?
we had hundreds and hundreds of Cuddlist practitioners, but they were independent practitioners. We had about 8 people on our team. And similar, so I got to sort of move forward to go back a little bit. So what happened during Cuddlist is Cuddlist was it was a business to bring people together. But I realized that because it was $80 to $120 an hour, et cetera, it wasn't going to be the most scalable business. Not everyone wants to be touched. Not everyone's near a practitioner. So I came up with my new idea, which is Hear Me, which is instant. Anytime anyone needs to get something off their chest, there's someone available for them in real time with a similar lived experience. And that's scalable because the technology is scalable worldwide. And so when I really got serious about that, I went back to my business partner. So I had a partner that I started Cuddlist with and said, listen, I'm really getting busy because I had started working on Hear Me, and I think that I've taken Cuddlist as far as I can take it. And how do what can we do to get me out in a way that's not going to harm the business? So it was very collaborative, and in terms of that exit, it was a lot of one thing I learned in that business is sort of like how to be in business with someone. When I had Atomic Wings, I was the sole owner, and so essentially it was a conversation. So what does the company need? What can we take out of it? How can I exit myself out in a way that's constructive? Who can we bring in? So it's a bit more of a process, and it wasn't quite as driven just by strict numbers. There were a lot of other considerations involved in that one. So that one's a little out of the box.
Hmm. And when it came down to, like, I guess the transition where you were kind of bringing someone else in, replacing yourself, I guess
Yep.
is a good way to have that process laid out. So
Yep.
how long was that process end to end? And, did you stay on for a certain period of time while the new leadership was in?
Yeah, that process was like almost a year. And for me, it was difficult because when you bring in someone on, they have their own opinions and viewpoints and places they want to take the company that were different from what I wanted, right? And
Hmm.
so it's really about like the language of letting go, right? The process of sort of disengaging and trusting and fighting with yourself because you don't want to give up control, and you didn't sort of I didn't really have to because the deal wasn't done yet. So it was a struggle. Yeah, it was hard. It was a struggle for me because I wasn't as open to giving up control, even though I really wanted to, and I wanted to focus on my new company.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely tricky when someone else comes in with different styles, different everything, and something that you've built for quite some time. It can be very difficult. So let's shift gears to preparedness. Like, you have two very unique business exits here. Like, the Atomic Wings is a very unique business to the Cuddlist business. Like, these are two very different businesses. So what could you share in terms of tips for an entrepreneur listening to this around preparing a business to go through a transaction like these?
Yeah, so this is I'm learning from my mistake. Don't let the boring like make sure the boring stuff gets done, right? You can have the most fascinating business selling the most interesting things, but at the end of the day, and someone who's buying a business, they're going to look at the numbers, and if you don't sort of know where these expenses went, or so really solid bookkeeping and solid kind of information gathering, because if you don't have it, you spend all this time like trying to find stuff, and it drags on the process and makes the process a lot less fun. So keep your ducks in order so the fun stuff can happen. um, don't avoid it, even though you want to avoid it, because well, we're all different, right? But really try to keep your ducks in order, so when it's time for anything, whether it's a bank loan or going to an investor or selling your business or anything, you have your ducks in order, you have your papers in place, you know where everything is, and you can get through the that sort of stuff that you have to get through.
Hmm. Well said. And when it comes to timing, you did a pretty good job of articulating like why it was the right time for you personally. But what could you share in terms of tips for people out there around why it's the right time?
No, you're gonna know it, right? I mean, obviously you want to sell when you can get the most money, I guess, right? But you're also going to know when your desire to keep on pushing forward and growing the business starts to wane, that's your signal telling you it's time to get out. Hopefully that time aligns with a buyer, because what happens is, and I did it with the time, you stay in too long, then it's get out when your body's telling you to get out. When you feel it, do it. Otherwise, you'll start to resent it, and it's not good.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
That's my
definitely. Definitely, it's different for everybody. Everybody's at different chapters. I've heard everything from, a bunch of different co-founders being at different chapters of their lives. Some have families, some are just getting
right.
started, and it's just such a unique to the person question around timing. And there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer, but it's always so interesting to hear different responses for it.
Yeah, it's every business is very individual, and then founders by nature are idiosyncratic, and you know you're not starting and scaling a business if you're not intense, you're not passionate, right?
Hmm.
So knowing when that passion and intensity is sort of waning a little bit, and it may not show outwardly, but you'll feel. I felt it inwardly.
Yeah. So the act of kind of shopping it around, did that happen at all with Cuddlist? You mentioned that
No,
the
not
Dunkin
really.
Donut.
I didn't. I never brought in an outside party to sort of value the business, or at least not seriously. And neither of my sales happened in that way. I
Mhm.
imagine that's fairly unique because I think both of my businesses were fairly unique.
Got it. Got it. And you said it was 8 people was the
Cuddlist is
size of the
eight
team.
full-time employees. Yes.
Okay. And did they all stay on after new leadership kind of
Yeah,
came
they
in?
did. The thing that's really cool, and I'll give myself props for both of the companies, right? They both started doing they they basically took where I left. They're doing really well. And they sharpened the team and they sharpened the focus, and they were able to do what I was basically not willing to do, I guess, right?
Mm.
And so the entire team at Cuddlist stayed. In fact, they brought in people that used to be a part of the company, and maybe they were an assistant, whatever, and now they're an operations partner. So the head of operations. So they really, yeah. So the teams stayed at Cuddlist, grew stronger. And at Atomic Wings, I don't really know exactly what happened with their team, except I know the owners I sold it to are still the owners.
Nice. Yeah, that is a testament to the origin of the creation of the business. Like I've always enjoyed hearing companies that stay around after the founder leaves, and it is like a kind of trial by fire with the original concept, how it was built, like the processes in place and things like that can change, but it's always cool to see when something stays for a
Yeah.
long period of time.
Yeah, and I'll say Atomic Wings, I'm still on whenever they announce a new store, my name is still there. So I guess if I did a crappy job, they would have taken my name off. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that leads us to the finale, is knowing what you know now, what would you tell Adam 10 years ago?
I would tell Adam 10 years ago, this is very personal, but treat your ADHD, which I have ADHD, very seriously, because it get a really great get the spend as much as you can the last nickel on a really good, efficient, organized assistant who can help you so you can focus on so I could have focused on what I had to do because I spent a lot of time like a mad person where so spend as if that's you spend as much as you can afford, and now with generative AI and whatever, but make sure you have someone that's supporting you, doing everything you're not great at doing so you can do what you're great at. I think so. Know what you're good at, and know what you're not good at, and find ways to compensate for what you're not good at.
Well said. Well said. So that shifts gears to what you're doing now. What are you working on now, and
Yeah.
where can we
So
learn
what I'm
more?
working on now, it's a Hear Me, HEARME app. We're a peer support app, emotional wellness, mental health, but however you want to frame it. But essentially, the concept of loneliness, right? And COVID, I think prior to that, it was sort of esoteric. But I don't think anyone now after COVID, we know what happens when you're feeling lonely and isolated, the amount of anxiety and stress and negative consequences. So essentially, Hear Me is designed to connect you when you need to get something off your chest with someone who can be there for you in real time with a similar lived experiences. So whether we're working with nurse population in the South Bronx, where the nurses are primarily Caribbean women, and we staff our listeners with Caribbean women who've been ICU nurses at 3 in the morning, so they can relate to it, or you're an LGBTQ person and you can talk with someone that's been through that experience and you can feel safe with, right? So Hear Me, that's sort of the what we do. How we do it is we have a direct consumer app where for $7.99 you can download the app and be instantly connected with someone 24 hours a day as much as you want to use it. Or we partner with corporations or organizations where we support the people that work at those organizations, or we partner with the health plan or health insurance company where it's an embedded benefit. So with your dental, your 10 therapy sessions, you also have Hear Me. So that's what we do. So at our core, we're designed to solve loneliness, disconnection, and make us happier and healthier through the power of empathetic listening.
Very cool. I like it. Yeah, I think COVID really made that use case pretty clear with everybody all over the world. So where can people learn more about it? You said it was .app.
Hearme.app, HEARME.app. Hearme.app on the website or LinkedIn or Apple Store or Google Play, and download the app.
Cool. And as a bonus question, what stage are you guys at? How big is the team? And what
So
stage is it?
we're in fundraising, Series A fundraising now. The team is 8 people full time again. A tremendous amount of listeners that are contracted or different levels of listeners, and we're raising I think up to $4 million right now. We're about 1.5 in, so it's a great investment. And join our team, Adam at hearme.app. Feel free to email me or find me on LinkedIn.
And I love how there's a slight detail for all the listeners where you mentioned that it was 8 people again and taking it and scaling it. I think there is a comfort zone for operators and entrepreneurs.
Yeah, so my challenge right now is I've grown successful companies. I've never scaled a venture-backed company before. So that's sort of like, I feel it's like my last hurrah. Also because I'm so passionate about this idea that I really want to bring it as many people as possible.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, those are all the questions that I have for you. Wherever you guys are listening, the links that Adam mentioned will be in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, Adam.
Thank you, Steve. I really enjoyed speaking with you.